She walked out at 4:30 in the morning, barefoot. No phone, heavily intoxicated. Bloomington, Indiana, a college town with security cameras on nearly every corner. Nobody stopped her. Nobody followed her out. And nobody ever saw her again. Her name was Lauren Spierer. 20 years old, Indiana University sophomore. She was supposed to be asleep that night. Her boyfriend thought she was already home. She wasn't. Several people saw Lauren alive in those final hours. They were with her. They walked with her. Some of them held her up because she couldn't stand on her own, and not one of them agrees on exactly what happened next. Lauren vanished on June 3, 2011. Over 2,500 tips came in. The FBI got involved. Multiple properties were searched. A landfill was excavated for 9 days straight. They found nothing. No body. No forensic evidence. No confirmed sighting after 4:30 that morning. This was never a normal missing persons case. And 13 years later, not a single person has ever been charged. Somewhere in Bloomington, somebody knows what happened to Lauren Spierer. They just haven't talked.
Lauren Spierer.
Lauren Spierer.
Lauren Spierer disappeared.
Lauren Spierer disappeared.
This beautiful college student vanished without a trace.
She was not supposed to be just another missing persons case. Lauren Spierer was born on January 17, 1991, in Scarsdale, New York, a small suburban town just outside Manhattan. The kind of place where people have plans, where kids grow up with direction, where parents drop their children off at college and feel completely okay about it. Lauren's parents, Robert and Charlene, felt exactly that way when they said goodbye to her at Indiana University in 2009. They had no reason to worry. Their daughter was driven, stylish, passionate, and surrounded by people who loved her. She had a personality that pulled people toward her naturally. She loved vintage fashion from the 1960s and 70s. She spent her Saturdays in high school traveling into Manhattan to take classes at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Because fashion was not just something she liked, it was something she was building a future around. By senior year, she had already been voted best dressed. But underneath all of that, Lauren was carrying something heavier than most people realized. At some point during her teenage years, Lauren was diagnosed with long QT syndrome, a rare heart condition that causes dangerous, irregular heartbeats. For a girl who loved sports, who had already been called up to her varsity lacrosse team as a freshman, the diagnosis was devastating. She could no longer safely compete. Most teenagers would have crumbled under that kind of loss. Lauren redirected. She poured everything into fashion instead, graduated in 2009, and enrolled at Indiana University to study merchandising and textiles. She had already lined up a summer internship in New York before her junior year was even over. So, who exactly was this girl? She was 20 years old, 4'11", under 100 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a smile that people who knew her still describe the same way, years later. She was the girl who volunteered for Habitat for Humanity, who traveled to Israel on spring break to plant trees with the National Jewish Fund, who had a boyfriend she had been with since summer camp, a relationship her friends described as completely inseparable. She was the kind of person that, when she went missing, 500 volunteers showed up on a single Saturday just to help find her. That tells you something. But Indiana University, for all its energy, was also something else entirely. Something Lauren's parents say they never fully understood until it was too late. After Lauren vanished, Bloomington Police Captain Joe Qualters stood before cameras and used 3 specific words to describe how her friends had been behaving: perplexing, curious, and disturbing. He then publicly stated that only one of Lauren's friends had voluntarily called police with any information at all. That detail matters. Hold on to it. Because before any of that happened, before the searches, the press conferences, the national headlines, Lauren was living a completely normal college life inside one of the biggest party cultures in America. Indiana University had ranked number 1 for party culture multiple times. And in the summer of 2011, that culture was fully alive. Heavy drinking was routine. Drug use was common. Cocaine, Xanax, Klonopin, mixed freely with alcohol at pre-games and house parties, moving through student social circles almost casually. Lauren was part of that world too. Her doctor had warned her clearly. Mixing alcohol or drugs with long QT syndrome could stop her heart. The combination, in the wrong moment, could be fatal. 9 months before she disappeared, Lauren and her boyfriend Jesse Wolfe were arrested together at a football tailgate for public intoxication. The charges were eventually dropped after fines and a responsible alcohol program. Her parents knew their daughter partied. They did not fully know how much. And nobody could have predicted that one specific night, in June 2011, would be the night everything collapsed at once. Lauren had plans. She had an internship waiting in New York. She had Jesse. She had a flight home already booked. She never made it. So what happened between a perfectly normal college evening and a young woman disappearing without a single confirmed trace? That answer starts not with Lauren herself, but with the hours leading up to the moment the cameras lost her. And those hours are far more complicated than most people realize. June 2nd, 2011. A Thursday evening. Lauren had a migraine. She told Jesse over text that she was probably staying in. He believed her. He watched the basketball game from his own apartment, texted her goodnight, and went to sleep around 2:30 in the morning. He had no idea she had ever left. Earlier that evening, Lauren had been drinking wine with friends at a neighboring apartment. Casual, relaxed, nothing alarming. But then Jay Rosenbaum called. He was pre-gaming with his neighbor Corey Rossman and wanted people to come over. Lauren went. She walked over with her neighbor David Rohn. Surveillance cameras caught her leaving her building in a white top and black leggings. She looked fine. She looked like any other college student heading out on a Thursday night. Nobody watching that footage could have imagined it would be among the last confirmed images of her alive. At the pregame, the drinking continued. According to statements later given to investigators, Lauren and David had allegedly used cocaine mixed with Klonopin before even arriving. By the time the group headed out, Lauren was already severely intoxicated. Pause on that for a second. A girl with a known heart condition. A condition her own doctor had warned could turn fatal if combined with alcohol or drugs. And she was mixing both, heavily, in the middle of the night. Around 1:46 in the morning, Lauren and Corey entered Kilroy's sports bar using a fake ID. Witnesses inside described her as barely functional. At one point, she removed her shoes entirely and walked out barefoot onto the sand patio. She left both her shoes and her phone inside the bar. Her phone, the one thing a 20-year-old girl never puts down. She walked out without it and never came back for it. By 2:27 in the morning, Lauren and Corey left Kilroy's together and headed toward her apartment at Smallwood Plaza. Corey had to physically hold her up during the walk. At one point, he lifted her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry because she could not support her own weight. They reached the building. They got into the elevator. They made it to the 5th floor, the same floor where Lauren's apartment was located, just feet away from her door. And then, everything fell apart. 4 men were waiting in that hallway. One of them was Zach Oates, a fraternity brother and close friend of Jesse Wolfe. The moment they saw Lauren, barefoot, barely standing, alone with a man nobody knew well, the situation turned hostile fast. An argument erupted. Within seconds, one of the men punched Corey directly in the face. He went down. Lauren's apartment was right there, 30 seconds away. She could have walked through that door, and none of what followed would have happened. Instead, she and Corey left the building entirely. Surveillance cameras in a nearby alley captured what happened next. Lauren stumbled badly. She fell to the ground twice. She dropped her purse, she dropped her keys. She kept walking without stopping to pick either of them up. She did not even realize she had dropped them. That footage alone told investigators everything they needed to know about how severely impaired she truly was. They eventually made it to Corey's apartment at 5 North Townhomes. His roommate Mike Beth was home sober that night. He saw immediately how bad the situation was. Corey was vomiting on the carpet. Lauren was barely coherent. Mike put Corey to bed and called Jay Rosenbaum to come take Lauren next door. By around 4:15 in the morning, Lauren was at Jay's apartment. Jay tried to get her to stay. He told her to lie down on the couch, sleep it off, go home in the morning. She refused. Every time he tried to slow her down, she pushed back. She made 2 phone calls from Jay's phone, one to David Rohn, one to another friend. She was still trying to keep the night going. Then she stood up. She announced she was leaving, and she walked out into the darkness alone, barefoot, no phone, no keys, no purse. Lauren's father, Rob Spierer, publicly stated that every man who spent the final hours with his daughter hired lawyers almost immediately after she vanished, creating what he described as a wall of access that made it nearly impossible for the family or their investigators to get direct answers from the people last seen with her. Investigators built a complete timeline using surveillance footage and witness statements. They traced every confirmed movement Lauren made that night across multiple cameras and multiple locations. The last confirmed image of Lauren Spierer was captured as she turned south onto College Avenue from 11th Street. After that frame, nothing. No footage, no witnesses, no confirmed sightings, no trace of any kind. A college town with cameras on nearly every block. Hundreds of students still awake at that hour. A girl under 5 feet tall, barefoot, visibly intoxicated, walking alone in the middle of the night. And not a single person saw where she went. How is that possible? That question has never been answered. And the longer investigators looked, the more they realized this case was not going to be solved by what the cameras captured. It was going to be solved by what someone decided to finally say out loud. The morning of June 3rd, Jesse Wolfe woke up and called Lauren's phone. A stranger answered. The person on the other end worked at Kilroy's bar. They said someone had left a phone there the night before. Jesse was confused. As far as he knew, Lauren had stayed home with a migraine. He called her roommates. Her bed had not been slept in. That was the moment everything changed. Friends started calling around. Everyone assumed she had passed out somewhere and would surface by morning. But every call came back the same way. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew where she was. By 4:30 that afternoon, Jesse filed a missing persons report. 12 hours had already passed since Lauren walked out of Jay Rosenbaum's apartment. Within 24 hours, Lauren's parents Robert and Charlene flew in from New York. Her sister Rebecca came too. They arrived in Bloomington and joined the search immediately. Within days, the story exploded nationally. Good Morning America, CBS Morning News, social media, celebrities sharing her photo. A Facebook group dedicated to finding her grew to tens of thousands of followers almost overnight. A reward fund climbed past $120,000. 500 volunteers showed up on a single Saturday to search for one girl. And still nothing. Police deployed dive teams to Lake Monroe, 25 minutes south of the university, after an anonymous tip came in. They found nothing. Volunteers searched the Griffey Reservoir area. Nothing. Indiana State Police combed wooded areas southwest of Martinsville after reports of a strange odor. Nothing. Every search ended the same way. In August 2011, investigators made the decision to search the Sycamore Ridge Landfill, 55 miles from the university. It was where Bloomington's trash was hauled. The logic was grim but unavoidable. The search lasted 9 days. Specialists from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children assisted. Teams sorted through more than 4,000 tons of garbage by hand. 9 days. 4,000 tons. Nothing. Meanwhile, the people who had spent the final hours with Lauren were becoming increasingly difficult to reach. Jay Rosenbaum hired a high-profile Indianapolis attorney almost immediately. Reports surfaced that he had left his Bloomington apartment in the middle of active search efforts. His lawyer released a statement saying he had cooperated fully and passed a polygraph, but the optics troubled investigators and the public alike. Corey Rossman gave a brief statement to cameras saying he was not the last person with Lauren and that he hoped she would be found. Then, he went silent. He refused all further interviews. He refused to speak with Lauren's family or their private investigators. Mike Beth said nothing publicly. Jesse Wolfe helped with early searches. Then his parents arrived in Bloomington and advised him to step back entirely. Lauren's father watched all of it happen and described it simply. He said the people with his daughter that night had created a wall of access. They had lawyers, they had silence, and they had answers nobody was getting. At the same time, a different kind of noise was spreading through Bloomington. Rumors. The most persistent one said Lauren had overdosed during the night, that the people around her had panicked when they realized she was in serious danger, that instead of calling 911, someone made a different decision, one driven by fear of criminal charges, fear of exposure, fear of what would happen if the truth came out. Police addressed it directly in a press conference on June 13th. They stated clearly that despite all the rumors, no official suspects had been named. But the rumors did not stop. Then surveillance footage emerged showing a white pickup truck passing near the area where Lauren was last seen, twice, during the same window of time she was believed to be walking home. For a brief moment, it felt like a breakthrough. Tips flooded in by the hundreds within hours. 5 days later, investigators announced the truck was no longer relevant to the case. Another door closed. And then, years passed. Human remains found in Indiana and nearby states would periodically trigger fresh waves of hope for Lauren's family. Each time, investigators would confirm the remains were not hers. Each time, the cycle of hope and devastation repeated itself. By 2016, the FBI conducted searches at 2 separate properties connected to a man named Justin Wagler, a registered sex offender who had made violent threats toward a woman, while Lauren's case was still active. Cadaver dogs were brought in. A white truck belonging to Wagler was towed from the property. No charges connected to Lauren were ever filed, but investigators had clearly seen something worth pursuing, and that question, what exactly they saw, has never been answered publicly. In November 2017, Brown County prosecutor Ted Adams went on record stating that he personally believed the man convicted of murdering another Indiana University student was also connected to Lauren's disappearance, a theory that sent shockwaves through everyone who had been following the case for years. That man's name was Daniel Messel, and the student he had already been convicted of killing was Hannah Wilson, another Indiana University girl, who had also spent her last night at Kilroy's bar. The same bar Lauren was at the night she vanished. That is not a coincidence anyone who has followed this case can easily dismiss. Was it connected? Was Lauren's disappearance and Hannah's murder the work of the same person? Or was this case always about something that happened much closer to home, inside a circle of people who already knew exactly what they were never going to say? Nobody has answered that yet. And as the years kept passing, the silence around this case only grew louder. 5 years passed, then 10, then 14, and through all of it, Lauren Spierer remained missing. No body, no confirmed evidence, no arrest, no charge, no closure of any kind for a family that had been living inside the same unanswered question since June of 2011. But the theories never stopped, and some of them were deeply disturbing. The first theory, the one that spread fastest and refused to die, was built around the people who were with Lauren that night. According to this possibility, Lauren did not encounter a stranger. She did not wander somewhere alone and collapse. Instead, something happened while she was still surrounded by people who knew her. The argument goes like this. Lauren was mixing alcohol, cocaine, and Klonopin while carrying an undetected heart condition. Her doctor had explicitly warned her that combination could be fatal. According to this theory, her heart gave out, and the people around her, terrified of criminal exposure, drug charges, or worse, made a decision not to call 911. They got rid of her instead. Former FBI cold case agent Brad Garrett, who spent years working this case alongside a private investigation team hired by Lauren's family, described this as the theory he kept returning to above all others. Simple, plausible, and devastating if true. The problem? Nobody has ever talked. And that silence, maintained across multiple people, across more than a decade, is either proof of innocence or proof of something far more calculated than a panicked group of college students. Which one is it? Investigators also looked hard at an ex-convict named James McClish. He had been recently released from prison at the time of Lauren's disappearance. He drove a white truck matching the one captured on surveillance footage near where she was last seen. He lived 10 minutes from that exact spot. A woman connected to McClish reportedly told investigators he had made comments suggesting that what happened to Lauren could happen to her too. That is not the kind of statement anyone forgets. McClish agreed to take a polygraph examination arranged by the ABC News 2020 investigative team. The examiner stated publicly that McClish appeared truthful when denying involvement. That lead went cold. Then came the biker gang theory. A former enforcer for a motorcycle gang known as the Sons of Silence, a man who went by the name Bo Dean, was allegedly implicated through a message sent by one of his own relatives. The message claimed he had shot Lauren over a drug dispute and buried her on his property. When investigators approached him directly, he denied everything. Lauren's phone records showed no connection to him whatsoever. The theory collapsed. Then, something far more chilling surfaced from inside an Indiana state prison. An inmate claimed that while playing cards with another prisoner named Corey Hammersley, Lauren's photo appeared on a television screen. According to the inmate, Hammersley looked up and said he knew the people responsible for what happened to her. Hammersley then reportedly described the night Lauren died at a house party. Alcohol and ecstasy. She collapsed. The people around her panicked. And then, according to the story passed through prison walls, her body was taken to the Ohio River and disposed of. When investigators interviewed Hammersley directly, he denied involvement. He said he did not want to be associated with the case in any way. He never cooperated officially. Without evidence, the account remained exactly what it was: a story told inside a prison that could never be verified. In January 2016, the FBI and Bloomington police conducted simultaneous raids on 2 separate properties connected to a registered sex offender, bringing cadaver dogs, digging up a barn, and hauling away a white truck in what became the most visible investigative push the case had seen in years. The man at the center of those searches was Justin Wagers, a convicted sex offender with a history of targeting women, already sitting in a county jail at the time. Cadaver dogs signaled at a barn on his property. Anthropologists dug through the soil. A white truck was towed away for examination. Nothing connected to Lauren was found. No charges were ever filed. And just like every other lead before it, that door closed too. But one theory refused to fade completely. In 2015, another Indiana University student named Hannah Wilson disappeared after a night out. She had also been at Kilroy's bar. She had also been walking alone afterward. Her body was found the following morning in Brown County, beaten to death. A local man named Daniel Messel was convicted of her murder and sentenced to 80 years in prison. The similarities to Lauren's case were impossible to ignore. Same university, same bar, same vulnerability, same vanishing act after a night out. In November 2017, Brown County prosecutor Ted Adams went on record stating his personal belief that Daniel Messel's pattern of behavior was consistent with what happened to Lauren. He called it a modus operandi, a signature, the kind of calculated targeting that does not happen once. Messel has never been charged in connection with Lauren's disappearance. But the question that prosecutor raised has never truly been answered either. Was Lauren's case always about someone who knew her? Or did the wrong person happen to be driving through Bloomington at exactly the wrong moment, on the night she walked out alone into the dark? 14 years later, both possibilities remain open. And somewhere between all of these theories, the truth is still waiting. Life kept moving. For everyone connected to this case, the years rolled forward. People graduated. They started careers. They got married. They moved to different cities and built entirely different lives. Everyone except Robert and Charlene Spierer. For Lauren's parents, time never moved past the morning of June 3, 2011. Every year that passed without an answer was another year spent inside the same unbearable silence. Birthdays became the hardest days to survive. Holidays felt like reminders of everything that had been taken. Every time human remains were found somewhere in Indiana, the phone calls would start again, and the waiting would begin all over. Each time, the remains were not Lauren's. Each time, they had to absorb that news and keep going. Lauren's mother, Charlene, became the public voice of the family over the years. She posted regularly on social media, not to perform grief, but because staying visible was the only tool she had left. Every post was a reminder to the public that her daughter was still missing, that the case was still open, that someone out there still knew something. In January 2023, on what would have been Lauren's 32nd birthday, Charlene wrote directly to her daughter online. She described how certain dates had become almost impossible to get through. She talked about how fragile everything is, how quickly a life can be erased, and how the not knowing is a different kind of pain than anything else a person can carry. She ended the message by saying she hoped that one day justice would finally find Lauren. That line stayed with everyone who read it, because it was not anger. It was not bitterness. It was a mother who had been waiting over a decade and had never once stopped believing her daughter deserved to be found. Then in 2024, a journalist named Sean Cohen published a book titled College Girl Missing, a deep investigative account of Lauren's disappearance that included new details gathered through extensive interviews with Lauren's roommates, close friends, and people connected to the case. Lauren's family publicly acknowledged the book and thanked the author for keeping their daughter's story alive. They wrote that Lauren had disappeared in plain sight and that someone out there still knows the truth. That line lands differently when you understand the full timeline of this case. Someone saw her leave Jay Rosenbaum's apartment. Someone may have seen her on that street. Someone may know exactly what happened in those final minutes between the last camera frame and the silence that followed. They have never said a word. On June 3, 2025, 14 years to the day after Lauren vanished, the Bloomington Police Department released a public statement confirming the investigation remains active, that tips continue to come in, and that their team remains fully committed to finding answers for Lauren's family. 14 years. Over 2,500 tips received. More than 10 search warrants executed in the years since she went missing. Lakes searched. Forests searched. A landfill sorted through for 9 straight days. FBI raids. Cadaver dogs. Private investigators. A book. A national media campaign. And still nothing. No body. No forensic evidence. No confession. No charge. Lauren Spierer walked out of an apartment on a Thursday night in a college town with cameras on every block and witnesses everywhere. And she was gone within minutes. That is what makes this case so different from every other unsolved disappearance. It is not that there are no leads. It is that every lead eventually runs into the same wall. Silence from people who may know far more than they have ever admitted. Charlene Spierer's most recent public message closed with 7 words. To our dear Lauren, in our hearts, always. She has written some version of that every year since 2011. Every single year. That is not a woman who has given up. That is a woman who has accepted that she may never get the answer she deserves, and who keeps showing up anyway because her daughter's name is worth fighting for. Lauren Spierer was 20 years old. She had a future waiting for her in New York. She had a family who loved her without condition. She had dreams that never got a chance to breathe. Somewhere in Bloomington, or beyond it, the truth about what happened that night still exists. It exists in someone's memory, in someone's silence, in something someone has carried for 14 years and has never been willing to put down. Lauren Spierer was not a headline. She was a daughter, a girlfriend, a friend who made people laugh, a girl with a vintage fashion sense, a heart condition she refused to let define her, and a future she was genuinely excited about. She was 20 years old, and somewhere between 4:30 in the morning and the first light of June 3, 2011, someone made a decision that erased all of it. Cases like this one get solved because one person finally decides the weight of their silence is heavier than the cost of telling the truth. One memory, one detail, one conversation that someone has been replaying in their head for 14 years. If you know anything about what happened to Lauren Spierer that night, anything at all, contact the Bloomington Police Department directly at 812-339-4477. Lauren's family has waited long enough. This case has required extensive research across multiple investigations, legal proceedings, and years of documented coverage to cover every angle fully. If you want to read the complete investigative record for yourself, all source links are available in the description below. If this story moved you, if Lauren's name deserves to stay alive, subscribe to Hidden Truth. Every case we cover is a real person. Every story we tell is someone's unanswered question. Lauren Spierer deserves her answer. This has been Hidden Truth.